Let's go to the next one here. This is a really interesting story, and this is one that I think highlights something that a lot of you have shown quite a bit of interest in. Big Pharma and how they make a ton of money with the US government's help, with lawyers, and with regulation. So this is probably the best example so far from a big investigation. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. Quote, how a drug company made $114 billion by gaming the US patent system. They specifically, for years, delayed competition for its blockbuster drug at the expense of patients and of taxpayer, with a monopoly that is about to end. So this goes back to a drug that some of you might have even taken before. It's called Humira. In 2016, it was poised to become a lot less valuable because the key patent on this anti-inflammatory medication, which is used to treat stuff like arthritis, was expiring at the end of the year. Regulators had actually blessed already a rival version of the drug, and more copycats were already willing to come as the patent was about to expire. This was going to push down the medication, and I'm not kidding here, its actual sticker price, $50,000 per year. Wow. So how did Humira and the manufacturer actually do this? Well, they blocked the competitors from entering the market, and actually over the next 6 years continued the price rise. And today, this drug is the most lucrative in the history of the entire pharmaceutical industry. Jesus. So what they did is they used their monopoly power to orchestrate a delay by building all this intellectual property protection around its drug and then suing would-be competitors before them settling with them to continue delaying their product launches. So even though they knew they were going to lose, they used IP law, patent law, and legal chicanery to continue suing them, pushing things into active litigation, delaying the release of the drug, and then doing it for a year and delaying it because every year is printing so many billions for the entire company. 114 billion now at this point. The current sticker price of the drug is $80,000 a year, which they continued. So remember this. They had 50 as the most lucrative drug in history. So they know it's going to end. So what do whenever you have a limited monopoly and they know the time is going to expire eventually? You just keep jacking the price of that drug up significantly. It's now up over 60% from one of its original, and it's actually increased 30 times in the life cycle of the entire drug, including just 8% this month. And by doing that, you just print ungodly amounts of money. I mean, it really is difficult to actually even wrap your head around what $114 billion actually is from a single drug. And then when you also consider, we're talking about anti-inflammatory, and like, look, I don't want to go all Instagram health here, but let's just say there's a hell of a lot of inflammation in the United States. A lot of people have arthritis, a lot of people do not eat well, and a lot of people turn to drugs, and doctors in particular are not going to tell you a lot about anti-inflammatory foods or any of the other things that you can do on your own, and instead they're going to go ahead and prescribe you this drug. Maybe by the time you get the drug, it's just too late at that point, or maybe you just congenitally have arthritis, any one of these other conditions. So you actually need it in order to live a functioning life. In the meantime, these people earned insane amounts of money, and you have to think too about the consumers. Even if you have, and I want people to understand this too, everybody's like, oh, insurance, everybody likes their doctor, and whenever you go to the pharmacist, you're like, thank God I have insurance. But you should think a couple of times around that, because the insurance companies negotiate these pre-rebates with the actual pharmacies, where they pay X amount per drug, even if the production cost of that drug, if you bought it out of pocket, might be 200, 300% less. So you think you're getting a deal, but you're actually getting screwed. And the reason why you're getting screwed is you have a preset amount that you can actually spend on drugs per year. This is actually very common in elderly plans. So you'll have, let's say you're an elderly person, you're 65 years old, and you're like, oh my God, I got this drug, and it covers up to $10,000 per year. And I only have to pay $2,000 out of my pocket. You don't know that you're actually paying way more than if you didn't even have insurance. You have no idea. The pharmacy's not even allowed to tell you about this. A lot of these are secret, uncompetitive agreements that are all negotiated behind the scenes. I have no idea how any of this is even legal, but there was a real human cost to this, which is people had to spend a lot of their life savings or social security checks effectively bankrolling the manufacturer of this drug, $114 billion. Think about how much money that is.
And this is a particularly egregious example because you had, for example, Medicare, which covered in 2020 the cost of this drug for 42,000 patients, spent $2.2 billion more on this drug from 2016 to 2019, so just over 3 years, than it would have if competitors had been allowed to offer their versions of this drug. So $2 billion just thrown out the window for this drug because of the way they were able to manipulate the patent system to their benefit. And so what I really want you to understand here is what the pharmaceutical shills and lobbyists would say is, oh, we need these patents because we're gonna, this is what enables us to invest all this money in life-saving research, et cetera, et cetera. What they really spend their time on, in terms of drug research, most of what they spend their money on is like new formulations, minor changes to their existing suite of highly profitable drugs. That's one thing. So like, oh, we'll have it instead of a 12-hour time release, how about we have a 13-hour time release? That enables them, by the way, to help them game the patent system, because then it's, oh, this is a new innovation. We can get a new patent on this and extend our monopoly on this product. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is the sort of lawfare that they wage in protecting these patent regimes. So one example that they give in this article, just to give you a sense, is an early Humira patent that expired in 2016 claimed the drug could treat a condition known as I don't know how to say this, something spondylitis, type of arthritis that causes inflammation in the joints, among other diseases. In 2014, they applied for another patent for a method of treating this same type of arthritis, but the only thing that was different about this patent is they said specific dosing of 40 milligrams. And guess what? That patent application was approved, and that added 11 years of patent protection beyond 2016. Just for that one little tweak of, oh, it's not just for this particular type of arthritis, it's the 40 milligram dosage in particular. And that was considered by our legal system a sufficient innovation to justify 11 additional years of this monopoly that is costing patients millions of dollars and costing the federal government billions of dollars on this one drug. The other thing I want to highlight here is they talk about the real world human beings who are impacted by this, and it's terrible. You have people who, one of the things this treats is painful skin condition, psoriasis. There is, no other drug that does what this one does to deal with what is an incredibly uncomfortable and painful condition. And so you've got people who are delaying retirement because they have to keep their health insurance to be able to afford this critical drug for themselves. You have one example where a woman was employed. Her employer, what they did rather than authoring health insurance, they actually paid all the medical costs out of pocket. And it was costing them $70,000 a year for her prescription, which was actually more than her entire salary. So the HR department actually called her up and was like, hey, would you be open to flying to the Bahamas to get this drug from a place that has it much, 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 much cheaper? And so that's what they ultimately ended up having to do because of our system. The amount we pay for prescription drugs, completely insane. I actually have a little bit of this in my monologue today. You have people who, they retired who didn't realize the way that costs were going to skyrocket for them with this essential prescription, and they just can't afford, and they're just having to go without. So there are massive human costs for this. And the lies that we're told about how these big pharma companies are just like looking out for us and investing in life-saving research, it's bullshit. They're spending most of their time and money and research and efforts trying to find ways to keep their monopolies and gouge the American consumer.
It makes me sick thinking about some 80-year-old lady who's not able to afford this drug.
Suffering.
And literally getting breakouts of sores all over her face. She's 80 years old. And or even one of the revelations here, you were touching on is it actually costs more for Medicare patients. So that means that the government is directly benefiting and subsidizing quite a bit of this. It's one of the most corrupt schemes in history, and I don't even know how to describe how evil all of it is. Let's put this up there on the screen just to make sure that we link it to something even bigger. Big pharma groups right now are actually rejoining a battle with governments on drug prices. And I love the subhead here. Tight budgets and U.S. reforms are ending after a truce between industry and health authorities. Now, what exactly was that truce? The truce was during COVID. There was obviously massive subsidization by the U.S. government and by many governments around the world around COVID drugs, around pharmaceutical research, around directly profiting not only to vaccines, but you got to think about therapeutics and many of the other extraordinary measures that the government went to make sure that these companies had everything they need to help fight COVID. Well, now that all of that is ending, the pharma industry is basically going and playing hardball with all of these governments, which are rightfully pulling back on their spending and on their subsidies. And they're like, no, 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 no. We want to keep those subsidies going. We want to make sure that you're going to be spending as much as you can. They point to a couple of examples, the same company pulling out of a major strict price regime in Europe after the National Health Service in the UK actually made the industry draw back some of its costs by over $3 billion. So it's a major hardball situation in terms of which companies are willing to work with some of these regimes. And it's not just here, it's literally all over the world. And you should remember here, we spend more on branded prescription drugs than any other country on earth. Some cases spending more on the same drug in this country than in others simply because they have straight up price controls over there. But it goes to the fact that these mandatory discounts and all these things were taken away by many governments, and in many cases they were subsidized. And now these pharma companies are fighting for their life to get even more of their profit after having this, quote, temporary truce. So this goes even deeper than this one drug.
Absolutely. I mean, we pay, they have the numbers here. Overall, we pay about 2.5 times the average drug price paid by a group of 32 comparison countries. And on name brand drugs, that disparity is even larger. We are the pharmaceutical industry's piggy bank. Individual consumers and the US government are their piggy bank. They feel free to gouge us to insane degrees. And, you know, part of the problem has always been that Medicare is not allowed to negotiate with these companies on the prices of drugs. So where you have France and the UK and other countries that are like, we're not paying more than X, we're not allowed to do that. Now, they just passed legislation that would allow us on a few, this is like such a limited reform, and a handful of drugs to be able to negotiate prices. And these drug companies are freaking out even about just that incredibly moderate reform that we ultimately instituted. So it's a racket. I mean, it really is just like a criminal racket, and you guys are their guinea pigs. You guys are their, you're their piggy bank. They think that they can go and gouge the U.S. consumer and gouge the U.S. government endlessly, and that there will never be any pushback. Why? Because they bought off so many of our politicians, people like Kirsten Sinema, who has been like consistently making sure that any sort of reforms in this direction are completely limited.
Yep, very true.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.